Fantasy Football Week 2. Start and sit. An in-depth weekly look at NFL matchups and how they'll affect your fantasy football lineup, with players you should start, sit and a sleeper for each game. Week 1 recap. Chiefs 27, Ravens 20. Isaiah likely had flashed in his previous 2 seasons with Baltimore, but that was mostly without Mark Andrews in the lineup. Andrews was healthy at Kansas City, and likely still had 9 receptions for 111 yards and a TD. He would have had a second score if he happened to be one size smaller in shoes. I don't believe Andrews disappears, but I also don't believe this performance was a fluke. Likely played nearly as many snaps, 59 to 53, and had a team-high 12 targets. Andrews only had 2. Eagles 34, Packers 29. Tucker Kraft played significantly more than Luke Musgrave at tight end in the opener against Philadelphia, outsnapping him 64 to 17. Of course, it doesn't really matter until Jordan Love is healthy. Steelers 18, Falcons 10. Justin Fields was relatively efficient and did enough to help Pittsburgh win at Atlanta, but we all know what he's capable of in fantasy, and there's no guarantee Russell Wilson will be back this weekend at Denver. Also, there's no guarantee Wilson will hold onto the job once he does return, making Fields a solid stash candidate. Bills 34, Cardinals 28. Josh Allen joined Steve Young as the only players to score multiple passing and rushing touchdowns in a game 4 times. Bears 24, Titans 17. Caleb Williams became the first QB drafted number 1 to win his NFL debut since 2002, but it wasn't pretty. Williams only completed 14 of 29 passes for 93 yards and was sacked twice. He also added 15 yards on 5 carries. The silver lining is he didn't make any turnovers. He recovered his 1 fumble. Patriots 16, Bengals 10. Cincinnati needs a better alarm clock. The Bengals trailed by 10 or more for the 3rd straight season opener and haven't scored a TD in the first half of Week 1 since 2021. Texans 29, Colts 27. With strong-armed Anthony Richardson back in the lineup, 2022 second-round pick Alec Pierce caught passes of 60 for a TD and 57 yards. Pierce could finally fulfill his potential if Richardson remains healthy. Dolphins 20, Jaguars 17. Jacksonville coach Doug Peterson told anyone who would listen that Tank Bigsby would have a bigger impact in his second season and that they plan to get him more involved. Well, Bigsby matched Travis Etienne's 12 carries and had a team-high 73 rushing yards. Etienne had 44, but also scored a TD. Saints 47, Panthers 10. Bryce Young showed little improvement from his rookie season. He was intercepted on his first play of the game and started the second half with another pick. Vikings 28, Giants 6. Are we sure Mike Kafka wasn't still calling plays? The G-Men's offense didn't look any different with Brian Daboll as the play caller than it did last season. Chargers 22, Raiders 10. Talent has never been the issue with J.K. Dobbins. It's been durability. If the universe will bless the former second-round pick, number 55 overall, with good health for an entire season, Dobbins could be a league winner. He had 135 yards and a TD on only 10 carries versus Las Vegas. He's still just 25 years old, turns 26 in December, with plenty of tread left on the tires. Seahawks 26, Broncos 20. Kenneth Walker is currently day-to-day with an abdominal injury he suffered against Denver. Zach Charbonnet had 10 touches against the Broncos, including an impressive 30-yard TD reception to begin the 4th quarter, and would be the primary beneficiary if Walker misses any time. Cowboys 33, Browns 17. I understand if you want to chalk Deshaun Watson's subpar performance to a terrible matchup against Dallas or the fact Cleveland was without both its starting offensive tackles Jedrick Wills and Jack Conklin, but the pressure only mounts from here. It's fair to say the 2020 version of Watson, the one most of us considered a top 5 QB in the NFL, might never return to the field. Buccaneers 37, Commanders 20. Rachaad White remains the lead back in Tampa Bay, 21 touches for 106 total yards, but the rookie Bucky Irving looked like the more explosive runner, 62 yards on 9 carries, against Washington. Lions 26, Rams 20, OT. Puka Nacua suffered a sprained PCL against Detroit and will miss at least 4 games after LA placed him on IR. The Rams have a bye in Week 6, so Nacua won't return until at least Week 7. Both Demarcus Robinson and Tyler Johnson stepped up after Nacua was hurt Sunday night. Both received 7 targets. 49ers 32, Jets 19. Frankly, if you drafted Christian McCaffrey with the number 1 overall pick in your fantasy draft, you should have also purchased his insurance policy. Jordan Mason rumbled for 147 yards and a TD on 28 carries, his most since high school, against the Jets on Monday night with McCaffrey out due to a calf and Achilles injury. The Niners would be wise to give Mason 10 to 12 carries per game to lighten CMC's load when he returns and keep him fresh for the duration of the season. That type of volume would give the angry runner flex appeal in deeper standard formats. Feel free to hit me up at Eddie Brown on X, formerly known as Twitter, with any specific lineup questions I don't cover in my posts. Here's my best bets for Week 2. Buffalo at Miami. Obvious starters: Josh Allen, BUF. James Cook, BUF. Dalton Kincaid, BUF. Tyreek Hill, MIA. Jalen Waddle, MIA. Tua Tagovailoa, MIA. Who to start? Khalil Shakir, BUF. Finished as the overall WR21 in standard formats, WR25 in PPR, last week and has WR3 flex upside. Rookie receiver Keon Coleman, BUF. Led the Bills in targets, 5, and yards, 51, in his NFL debut and has flex appeal in a potentially high-scoring affair. Devon Achane, MIA, is an obvious starter if he's active. Jeff Wilson Jr., MIA, has RB2 flex upside with the Dolphins dealing with multiple injuries in their backfield. Who to sit? Curtis Samuel, BUF, is a boom or bust option after only playing 17 of the Bills' 62 offensive snaps last week, and producing 2 receptions for 15 yards. I'm fading both the Bills' D, ST and Dolphins' D, Street. Raheem Mostert, MIA, is out with a chest injury. Sleeper. Dynamic rookie running back Jalen Wright, MIA, could be splitting touches with Wilson if both Achane and Mostert are sidelined. New Orleans at Dallas. Obvious starters: Alvin Kamara, no. Chris Olave, no. CeeDee Lamb, Doll. Dak Prescott, Doll. Cowboys D, Street. Who to start? Jawan Johnson, no, is facing a defense who allowed the 4th most fantasy points to tight ends in Week 1. Brandon Cooks, Doll, finished as the overall WR19 in standard formats, WR21 in PPR, last week and has WR3 flex upside. Who to sit? I'm fading Derek Carr, no, against a strong defense on the road after he was solid in Week 1. Rashid Shaheed, no, remains the quintessential boom or bust option. I'm fading the Saints D, ST on the road against an efficient offense. Jake Ferguson, Doll, suffered a sprained MCL in the opener and hasn't practiced as of Wednesday. Ezekiel Elliott, Doll, remains TD dependent while he's splitting carries with Rico Dowdle, Doll. Sleeper. The Saints will need to utilize Taysom Hill, no, to exploit matchups against an elite Cowboys defense. Tampa Bay at Detroit. Obvious starters: Mike Evans, TB. Raychaud White, TB. Chris Godwin, TB. Amon Ross Street Brown, Det. Sam Laporta, Det. Jahmyr Gibbs, Det. David Montgomery, Det. Who to start? Only Josh Allen topped Baker Mayfield, TB, in fantasy points Week 1. If you're streaming quarterbacks, the former number 1 overall pick should be on your radar. Cade Otton, TB, deserves streaming consideration against the Lions defense that has struggled against tight ends since the beginning of last season. Jared Goff, Det, is always solid at home and faces a defense that allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to quarterbacks last week. Jameson Williams, Det, finished as the overall WR3 in standard formats, WR5 in PPR, last week and has WR3 flex upside despite the difficult matchup. Monitor his ankle issue. Who to sit? This is a difficult matchup to trust rookie running back Bucky Irving, TB, despite looking like a more explosive runner, 62 yards on 9 carries, than White against Washington. Sleeper. Rookie receiver Jalen McMillan, TB, had a 32-yard TD reception in his pro debut last week and faces a defense that allowed the 2nd most fantasy points to wide receivers in Week 1. Indianapolis at Green Bay. Obvious starters: Jonathan Taylor, IND. Michael Pittman Jr., IND. Anthony Richardson, IND. Who to start? Alec Pierce, IND, finished as the overall WR6 in standard formats, WR10 in PPR, last week and faces a defense that allowed the 11th most fantasy points to wide receivers in Week 1. Josh Jacobs, GB, and Jaden Reed, GB, are the only Packers I trust to produce if Jordan Love is out. Monitor Jacobs' back issue. The Packers D, ST deserves streaming consideration at home, but their offense might be a hindrance this week. Who to sit? Josh Downs, IND, is still nursing a high ankle sprain. We'll need a bigger sample size to start trusting rookie receiver Adonai Mitchell, IND. I'm fading Christian Watson, GB, Romeo Dubes, GB, Dontavion Wicks, GB, Tucker Kraft, GB, and Luke Musgrave, GB, if Malik Willis, GB, is under center. Sleeper. If you're streaming defenses, it's hard to find a better option than the Colts D.ST against Willis. NY Jets at Tennessee. Obvious starters: Breece Hall, NYJ, Garrett Wilson, NYJ, Jets D.ST, Tony Pollard, 10. Who to start? Tyjae Spears, 10, deserves flex consideration in most PPR formats. Who to sit? Aaron Rodgers, NYJ, remains a fade outside of Superflex formats while he shakes off the rust. Keep Mike Williams, NYJ, on your bench while he's playing with a pitch count. Allen Lazard, NJY, remains a TD-dependent option in deeper standard leagues. Tyler Conklin, NYJ, faces a defense that only allowed 2 receptions for 3 yards to tight ends last week. It's inconclusive how the target share will play out between Calvin Ridley, 10, and DeAndre Hopkins, 10, now that it appears Hopkins is healthy. Will Levis, 10, remains a fade outside of Superflex formats. Sleeper. Chigoziem Okonkwo, 10, finished as the overall TE5 in standard formats, TE6 in PPR, last week thanks primarily to his 17-yard TD reception. The Jets tied for the second most TDs allowed to tight ends last season. San Francisco at Minnesota. Obvious starters: Deebo Samuel, SF, George Kittle, SF, Brandon Ayuk, SF, 49ers D.ST, Justin Jefferson, Min, Aaron Jones, Min. Who to start? If Christian McCaffrey, SF, is active, he's in your lineup. The Vikings tend to be blitz-happy and Brock Purdy, SF, usually eats well when a team sends extra defenders. Purdy completed 14 of 16 passes against the Vikes blitz in Week 7 last year for 183 yards and a TD. Who to sit? Jordan Mason, SF, is an obvious starter if CMC remains out. Otherwise, consider him a TD-dependent flex option in standard formats this week. I'm fading Jordan Addison, Min, with an ankle issue against a tough defense. Sam Darnold, Min, remains a fade outside of Superflex formats with a difficult matchup at home against a team that knows him well. Sleeper. Ty Chandler, Min, has flex appeal in deeper PPR formats with the Vikings facing a possible negative game script in the second half. Seattle at New England. Obvious starters: DK Metcalf, C, Ramondre Stevenson, nay. Who to start? Kenneth Walker, C, is an obvious starter if he's active. Monitor his oblique issue. Tyler Lockett, C, maintains WR3 flex upside after finishing as the overall WR30 in standard formats, WR22 in PPR, last week while dealing with a thigh issue. The Seahawks D.ST deserves streaming consideration against a vanilla offense led by Jacoby Brissett. The Patriots D.ST deserves streaming consideration at home against an offense traveling cross-country. Who to sit? It's hard to trust Jackson Smith and Jigba, C, outside of the deepest PPR formats until he surpasses Lockett in the Seahawks receiving pecking order. Geno Smith, C, remains a fade outside of Superflex formats against a defense that just kept Joe Burrow in check. TD dependent until further notice. Sleeper. Zach Charbonnet, C, has RB2 flex upside if Walker is out. NY Giants at Washington. Obvious starters: Brian Robinson Jr., was Terry McLaurin, Jaden Daniels, was. Who to start?